The Audi belongs to Sydney now. My mother didn't hesitate. She lifted her champagne glass, smiled across the foyer, and said it as if she were announcing dessert. No guilt, no apology, just certainty. I froze beside the front door, snow melting from my coat onto the marble floor. My grandfather slowly looked past me. His eyes settled on the empty driveway outside. Then he turned back toward my mother. "What did you just say?" "The Audi," she shrugged. "Sydney needed it more." "It's already been transferred." No one in the room breathed. Grandpa Winston didn't raise his voice. He simply looked toward the family attorney, standing beside the fireplace. "Philip, when exactly? Did I authorize anyone to transfer property that wasn't theirs?" The attorney didn't answer immediately. That was the moment I knew something was terribly wrong, because Philip never hesitated. Ever. My name is Meline Winston. I'm 32 years old, and for the past decade I've worked as a commercial real estate appraiser in Chicago. Every day, I determine what buildings are actually worth, not what people wish they were worth. Concrete doesn't care about ego. Numbers don't reward favoritism. Unfortunately, but families often do. Especially mine. If you looked at us from the outside, you'd think we had everything. Money, status, connections. The kind of family featured in magazine articles about generational success. Inside, we operated by one simple rule. Whatever belonged to me could eventually become Sydney's. People always assumed Sydney was the successful daughter. She photographed beautifully, spoke confidently, never entered a room without becoming its center. My mother adored that about her. Presentation matters. She'd repeated those words my entire childhood. I learned a different lesson. Presentation gets attention. Competence keeps buildings standing. Guess which one my family celebrated? My father, Howard Winston, avoided conflict the way most people avoided fire. If agreeing with someone kept dinner peaceful, he agreed. If staying silent protected the family image, he stayed silent. He wasn't cruel. He was simply willing to sacrifice fairness whenever it became inconvenient. That made him predictable. My mother, Catherine, wasn't. She believed appearances created reality. Luxury meant success. Designer labels meant intelligence. Expensive cars meant achievement. She judged people the way some people judged storefront displays. Sydney happened to fit perfectly inside the picture she'd always imagined. I never did. While Sydney changed college majors twice and spent weekends flying to Miami with friends, I spent mine inspecting warehouses, industrial parks, shopping centers, and office buildings. Commercial appraisal isn't glamorous. It's early mornings, steel-toe boots, construction dust, long reports, longer inspections, thousands of hours learning markets most people never notice. I loved every minute of it. Because unlike family, the profession rewarded effort. The day I finally earned my senior commercial certification, I came home carrying the official license in my briefcase. Mom glanced at it for less than 5 seconds. "So," she said, "you inspect parking lots now?" "Commercial developments," I corrected gently. She waved her hand. "Same thing." Then she turned toward Sydney. "So, tell us about your spa weekend." That conversation lasted almost an hour. Mine lasted 12 seconds. After a while, you stop expecting applause. You just keep working. Sydney eventually married Andre Vance. He worked in banking. Perfect suits, perfect smile, perfect manners. The kind of man who somehow managed to compliment everyone without saying anything meaningful. Dad loved him immediately. Mom adored him even more. He understands successful people. She used to say that proudly. I wasn't so sure. Andre talked endlessly about money, very little about value. There was a difference. Grandpa noticed it too. Grandpa Winston had built one of the Midwest's largest commercial real estate companies from a single delivery truck he'd bought before turning 30. By the time I was born, his name appeared on hospitals, university buildings, and charitable foundations. Yet the thing he distrusted most was anyone impressed by wealth. At restaurants, he watched how people treated servers. On construction sites, he talked to laborers before executives. He believed character revealed itself when nobody important was watching. That's probably why he understood me better than anyone else in the family. About 2 months before Thanksgiving, he invited me to lunch. I assumed we were discussing one of his industrial properties. Instead, he placed a small black box on the table. Inside sat the key fob to a brand new Audi. I stared at it. Grandpa, I can't accept this. He smiled. Of course you can. You've spent 10 years driving that old sedan until it practically begged for retirement. I wanted to buy you something that reminded you your hard work had value. I didn't earn this. He leaned back in his chair. Exactly. You earned the life that deserves it. No one had ever separated the two before. The gift wasn't for being family. It was for everything I'd quietly become. Mom hated the Audi before she ever saw it. A luxury car? For someone who inspects warehouses? She laughed. Meanwhile, Sydney actually meets important clients. I almost pointed out that Sydney's clients were mostly brunch reservations and shopping assistants. Instead, I stayed quiet. Arguing never changed anyone in my family. It only gave them another excuse to dismiss me. Thanksgiving arrived buried beneath fresh Chicago snow. I finished one final property inspection that afternoon and drove home later than planned. The building garage was nearly empty. I turned the corner toward my reserved parking space and instinctively reached for my keys. Then I stopped. My parking spot was empty. The Audi was gone. For 3 full seconds, and I simply stared at the empty parking space. Maybe I'd parked on another level. Maybe I'd forgotten after another 14-hour workday. I walked the entire garage anyway, row after row, level after level. Nothing. The Audi was gone. I called building security. A guard named Luis answered. Can I help you, Ms. Winston? My car's missing. What model? Black Audi A8. He became quiet. One moment. I heard keyboards clicking, then, oh. His voice changed. It wasn't stolen. I frowned. What do you mean? It was released. Released to who? According to our records. Oh. Your sister. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was impossible. My sister doesn't have authorization. Luis hesitated. The paperwork says she does. What paperwork? A signed ownership authorization. Signed ownership. Authorization. 3 words that should never have belonged in the same sentence. I'd like to see it. I'm sorry. I can't release internal records. Then tell me one thing. He paused. Was the signature verified? Another pause. No. It matched the authorization form we received. My stomach tightened. Someone hadn't stolen the Audi. Someone had convinced people it no longer belonged to me. Those were 2 very different crimes. I called Sydney immediately. She answered on the second ring. Hey, sis. Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. Where's my car? Our car? She laughed. No. The Audi. Oh. You mean Grandpa's gift? My gift. Another laugh. Relax. I've already picked it up. You what? You heard me. You had no right. Oh, come on. Mom explained everything. You don't even need a luxury car. You drive to warehouses. I actually meet clients. There it was. The same argument Mom had repeated for months. Except this time, Sydney sounded like she'd memorized it. I never agreed to any transfer. You didn't have to, she answered casually. It's a family decision. I felt my pulse quicken. A family decision? Exactly. You'll understand eventually. Then she hung up. I called Mom before I had time to think. She answered immediately. I was wondering when you'd notice. You took my car. No. We corrected a mistake. What mistake? Grandpa acted emotionally. Sydney needs that Audi more than you do. I closed my eyes. So you decided to give it away? We decided, she corrected. Your father agrees. Of course he did. He always agreed. Eventually. What exactly did Dad say? He said families share. No, I answered quietly. Dad says whatever ends the conversation. She ignored that. You've always been so independent. You'll recover. Sydney's building a life. You already have one. As if stability somehow disqualified me from fairness. I ended the call before I said something I'd regret. For several minutes, I sat alone inside my old sedan, the same sedan Grandpa had wanted me to replace. Snow collected silently across the windshield. I kept thinking about one sentence. It's a family decision. Not, can we borrow it? Not, would you consider helping Sydney? A decision, made without me, about property that belonged to me. The next morning, I called Philip, Grandpa's attorney. He answered before the second ring. Good morning, Meline. I need to ask you something. His tone immediately sharpened. What's wrong? My Audi. There was a brief silence. What about it? My family says ownership has already been transferred. Nothing, not even breathing. Finally, he asked one careful question. Who told you that? My mother. And? Sydney already has the car. Another long silence, long enough to make my heart race. Don't discuss this with anyone else, Philip said quietly. I'm coming to see you. What? Right now. I'll explain everything in person. His voice had changed. Not angry. Concerned. Deeply concerned. Philip, can they legally transfer my car without me? I don't want to answer that over the phone. Why not? Because He stopped himself, then said something that made every instinct in my body come alive. I need to determine first whether we're dealing with a family misunderstanding or a felony. Philip arrived less than 40 minutes later. Not at my apartment, at my office. He'd chosen neutral ground. That alone told me this was bigger than a disagreement over a car. When I walked into the conference room, he was already there, a thick leather portfolio resting on the table. He didn't offer coffee. He didn't waste time. Before we discuss the Audi, I need to ask you one question. I nodded. Did you sign anything for your parents recently? I frowned. No. Power of attorney? No. Vehicle transfer? Never. Any blank documents? I shook my head. No. Philip studied my face for several long seconds, satisfied. Then he slowly opened the portfolio. Inside was a photocopy. Vehicle title assignment. Owner, Meline Winston. Transferee, Sydney Winston Vance. Purchase price, $1. At the bottom was a signature. My signature. Except it wasn't mine. I stared at it. The handwriting looked close enough to fool someone who had never seen me write, but one tiny detail gave it away immediately. I never looped the final E in Meline. Never. This signature did. I looked up. I didn't sign this. I know, Philip answered quietly. You know? I knew the moment I saw it. Then why wasn't the transfer stopped? He sighed. Because the title never came through my office. What? It went directly through a third-party registration service. My stomach tightened. Someone hadn't accidentally made a mistake. Someone had intentionally gone around the family attorney. Who submitted it? Philip slid another document across the table. The application listed one representative. Andre Vance, Sydney's husband. Loan officer. Perfect smile. Perfect manners. Perfect timing. I leaned back in my chair. So Andre filed the paperwork. It appears that way. And Sydney? Accepted delivery. What about my parents? Philip didn't answer. Instead, he reached into the portfolio again. This time, he removed security footage. Black and white still images. Time-stamped. The DMV registration office. 3 days earlier. Sydney, Andre, and my mother. Standing together at the service counter. No one looked surprised. No one looked confused. No one looked like they were asking questions. They looked prepared. I don't understand, I whispered. How did they think this would work? Philip folded his hands. Most fraudulent transfers succeed for one reason. Nobody expects to be defrauded by family. Silence settled over the room. I looked again at the forged signature. For some reason, the car wasn't what hurt anymore. It was the planning, the meetings, the paperwork, the deliberate decisions made behind my back. This hadn't happened overnight. They'd organized it, step by step. While smiling across Thanksgiving dinner. Finally, I asked the question that mattered. Does Grandpa know? Philip didn't answer immediately. Instead, he closed the portfolio very carefully, then looked directly into my eyes. He knows about the Audi. My chest tightened. And he asked me not to confront anyone. I blinked. What? He said. Philip paused. And if someone inside your family is willing to forge one signature, and they're probably hiding something much larger. I stared at him. So he wants to wait? He wants evidence. What kind of evidence? The kind that doesn't disappear when people start making excuses. Everything suddenly made sense. Grandpa wasn't protecting a car. He was protecting a case. Philip stood. There is one more thing. He handed me a sealed envelope. Across the front, written in Grandpa Winston's unmistakable handwriting, were only 6 words. Open only after the first betrayal. I looked up. What does that mean? Philip gave the smallest shake of his head. I don't know. He never told me. He only said, you would know exactly when the time came. I looked down at the envelope, then slowly traced my thumb across the seal. My Audi had disappeared. My signature had been forged. My own family had planned it together. Deep inside, I already knew. This envelope had never been about the car. I didn't open the envelope. Not immediately. For almost an hour, it sat on the passenger seat beside me while I drove through downtown Chicago. Every red light became another excuse to reach for it. Every green light reminded me of Grandpa's instructions. Open only after the first betrayal. If he'd written those words, he'd expected this day long before I had. That evening, Grandpa called. I hear you've spoken with Philip. His voice sounded exactly the same as always. Calm. Steady. As though he were discussing the weather instead of a forged title. I have. And they forged my signature. A long silence. Then, I was hoping you were wrong. Not. I'm surprised. Not. That can't be true. He'd already prepared himself for the answer. Did you know? I suspected. For how long? I've been watching, he answered quietly. When people believe they've found an easy way to take something, they usually don't stop after the first success. His words stayed with me. The first success. Meaning. The Audi wasn't the destination. It was the beginning. I want my car back, I said. You'll get it. What if they refuse? Grandpa chuckled softly. They won't. How can you be so sure? Because they still think they're winning. The official Winston family Thanksgiving dinner began at 6. The dining room looked exactly as it always had. Crystal chandeliers, fresh flowers, silver polished until it reflected the candlelight. Everything carefully arranged to create the illusion of a perfect family. The only thing missing was my Audi in the driveway. Sydney had parked it directly beside the front entrance, almost like a trophy. She noticed me looking at it. Beautiful smile, perfect makeup, perfect confidence. Looks better on me, she whispered as I walked past. I think Grandpa agrees. I looked at her. No, he doesn't, she laughed. We'll see. Andre joined us near the entry hall. He jingled the Audi keys in his hand. You know, he said with a practiced smile, this car really fits our lifestyle. Our? I asked. He shrugged. Marriage is about sharing. Interesting. Apparently, the sharing only worked in one direction. Dinner hadn't even started, and everyone was already performing. Dad complimented Andre's promotion. Mom praised Sydney's taste in decorating. Every conversation somehow circled back to the Audi. How elegant it looked, how successful Sydney appeared driving it. Not once did anyone ask how I was getting around. Then Grandpa arrived. The room immediately changed. People stood, conversations stopped. Even Mom's smile became noticeably more careful. Grandpa greeted everyone politely. Then his eyes moved past them, straight toward the driveway, toward the Audi. He didn't smile. After dessert, he finally spoke. Meline, how's the Audi treating you? The room became very quiet. I answered honestly. I wouldn't know. I haven't driven it in days. Sydney laughed before anyone else could speak. Oh, I've been using it. Grandpa slowly turned toward her. Have you? Mom said it made more sense. I entertain clients. Meline doesn't. Grandpa looked at my mother. Catherine. Did you tell her that? Mom smiled confidently. We all agreed. You weren't using the car properly. So we simply handled the paperwork. The temperature inside the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Grandpa rested both hands on his cane. What paperwork? Andre stepped forward. The ownership transfer. It's all been completed. He sounded proud of himself. As clean as any dealership transaction. Grandpa didn't look at him. He looked at Philip. The family attorney had remained silent all evening. Until now. Philip, Grandpa said, tell everyone who legally owns that Audi. Philip stood slowly. Legally. And the registered title currently lists Sydney Winston Vance. Mom smiled. Dad relaxed. Andre looked almost victorious. Only Philip hadn't finished speaking. But, he continued, the transfer is currently under formal review because there is substantial evidence that the owner's signature was forged. The room exploded. What? Sydney stood so quickly, her chair nearly fell backward. Andre's smile disappeared. Mom stared at Philip in disbelief. Dad looked from one face to another, completely lost. Grandpa never moved, never raised his voice. He simply watched. like a man waiting to see which lie would be told first. Then, Andre spoke. "It's just a misunderstanding." Philip calmly opened a folder. "I certainly hope so, because if it isn't, this isn't a vehicle dispute anymore. It's felony forgery." "It's felony forgery." Nobody spoke, not immediately. The words landed in the dining room like shattered glass. Andre forced a nervous laugh. "Philip, surely we're getting ahead of ourselves." Philip didn't even look at him. "I hope I am. Because the alternative carries prison time." Sydney stood first. "This is ridiculous. Meline knows I would never steal from her." I finally looked at my sister. "You didn't steal it," I said quietly. "You signed paperwork claiming it already belonged to you." Her confidence slipped. Only for a second. Then it returned. Mom told me everything had been approved. The room shifted. For the first time, Sydney wasn't standing alone. She was pointing somewhere else. Mom immediately stepped forward. "I handled the paperwork." "There." She folded her arms. "Now stop attacking your sister." Grandpa's eyes never left her. "You handled..." "Whose paperwork?" "The family's." "No," he replied calmly. "My granddaughter's." Those two words weren't the same. Dad finally spoke. "Catherine, you..." "Tell me you verified everything." She frowned. "I didn't need to." "Meline would never fight family." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because that sentence explained my entire childhood. They hadn't respected my boundaries. They'd simply relied on them. Andre cleared his throat. "Let's stay rational. This was a misunderstanding." "No," Philip answered. "A misunderstanding doesn't produce a forged signature." He opened another folder. "This is the original title assignment." Then another. "This is Meline's driver's license." He placed both documents side by side, even from across the table. The differences were obvious. The spacing, the final letters, the pressure marks. Different. Completely different. Andre's expression tightened. "I didn't compare signatures." "Then who did?" Philip asked. Silence. No answer. Grandpa slowly rose from his chair, 82 years old, leaning on a cane. Yet, somehow, he became the tallest person in the room. "I've spent 60 years building this family," he said quietly. "I expected disagreements. I expected jealousy. I even expected greed." He looked directly at my mother. "I never expected fraud." Mom's voice cracked. "We weren't stealing." "We were helping Sydney." Grandpa nodded once. "With property that wasn't yours." "We're family," she whispered. Grandpa's face hardened. "No. Family asks. Thieves decide." The silence that followed hurt more than anyone shouting could have. Andre suddenly stepped forward. "There doesn't have to be a legal fight. I'm sure we can reverse the paperwork." Philip looked at him. "You think this investigation is about the Audi?" Andre hesitated. "Isn't it?" "No." Philip closed the folder. "The Audi simply told us where to look." Nobody understood, except Grandpa. He wasn't surprised. He almost looked disappointed, as though reality had finally confirmed something he'd hoped would never happen. "What exactly are you talking about?" Dad asked. Philip reached into his briefcase one final time. This folder was different. Thicker, far thicker. It landed on the dining table with a heavy thud. "I spent the last 48 hours reviewing transactions connected to the forged title." He opened the first page. "What started as one suspicious transfer led us somewhere unexpected. He turned another page, then another. Bank transfers, corporate filings, property records, loan documents. The pile kept growing. Andre's face slowly lost all color. He recognized the documents before anyone else did. Grandpa noticed. "So," he said quietly, "you've seen these before." Andre didn't answer. Philip slid one final document into the center of the table. 3 shell companies. 2 undisclosed loans. 4 commercial properties. Everyone connected. Through the same financial advisor. Dad leaned forward. "Who?" Philip looked directly at Andre. "You." Sydney stared at her husband. What is he talking about? Andre opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Mom looked from Andre to the documents, then back again. For the first time all evening, no one had an explanation. Grandpa quietly picked up the top page, then looked at Andre with heartbreaking disappointment. "I gave you access to my family's trust. Yeah, because I believed you wanted to become part of this family." He slowly placed the paper back down. "But it seems you were studying something else entirely." Before Andre could answer, the front doorbell rang. Philip checked his watch. "They're right on time." Dad frowned. "Who's here?" Philip looked toward the front entrance. 2 investigators. "From the FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force." "The FBI?" My father's voice barely came out above a whisper. He looked at Philip, then at Grandpa, then toward the front door. Nobody moved. For the first time that evening, no one seemed interested in the Audi anymore. Philip adjusted his glasses. "I contacted the Financial Crimes Task Force yesterday." Andre's head snapped toward him. "You called the FBI. Over a car?" Philip calmly shook his head. "No. I called because a forged vehicle title led us to evidence of something far more serious." The front door opened. 2 agents stepped inside. Dark suits, federal credentials, professional expressions that revealed absolutely nothing. The taller of the 2 introduced himself. "Special Agent Daniel Ross." His partner nodded. "Special Agent Karen Mitchell." Neither of them looked impressed by the Winston estate. People who investigate financial crimes rarely are. Andre forced a smile. "There must be some misunderstanding." Agent Ross looked at him. "Mr. Andre Vance?" "Yes." "We'd appreciate a few minutes of your time." Sydney immediately stepped between them. "My husband hasn't done anything," Agent Mitchell answered politely. "We're here to determine exactly that." Grandpa quietly returned to his chair. He didn't interfere. He didn't celebrate. He simply watched. This had never been about revenge. It was about truth. Agent Ross placed a thin folder on the dining table. "Our investigation didn't begin today." He looked toward Andre. "It began 4 months ago." Andre's face went completely blank. 4 months. Long before anyone touched my Audi. "We've been investigating fraudulent commercial loan applications. Using shell corporations." He opened the folder. "Several of those corporations share the same registered financial advisor." He turned one page. "Mr. Andre Vance." Nobody said a word. Sydney slowly looked at her husband. "You told me those companies were investment partnerships." Andre swallowed. "They are." Agent Mitchell calmly slid another document across the table. "No. They exist only on paper. They were used to obtain financing secured by properties the applicants never actually controlled." Dad sank into his chair. "Oh my God." Mom looked ready to faint. "This can't be happening." Grandpa finally spoke. "It already happened." "We're only learning about it." Andre tried one last time. "I never intended to hurt this family." Grandpa held his gaze. "No. You intended to use it." There was nothing cruel in his voice, only disappointment. That somehow hurt more. Sydney reached for Andre's hand. He didn't take it. Instead, he stared at the documents covering the table. One lie after another, one signature after another, one company after another. The perfect life my parents admired had never existed. It had simply been financed by deception. Agent Ross closed the folder. "Mr. Vance, we're requesting your cooperation." Andre looked exhausted. Not defeated, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying lies for too long. Finally, he nodded. "I'll cooperate." Over the following months, the investigation expanded. Several fraudulent loan applications were linked to Andre's network. Multiple shell companies were dissolved. Financial institutions recovered assets through court proceedings. The forged Audi title became one piece of a much larger chain of evidence. Ironically, the smallest crime exposed the largest one. The Audi was returned to me within weeks. The forged transfer was declared legally void. No one argued. No one appealed. There wasn't much left to argue about. Sydney filed for divorce less than a year later. For months, she avoided everyone, including me. One afternoon, she asked if we could meet for coffee. She looked nothing like the woman who had smiled behind the wheel of my Audi. "I should have asked you," she whispered. "I wanted Mom to be proud of me." I looked at her for a long moment. So did I. Neither of us spoke after that. Some wounds don't close because of one apology, but every honest apology is still a beginning. My parents changed, too. Not overnight. People rarely do. Dad finally admitted that avoiding conflict had allowed injustice to grow inside his own home. Mom struggled the longest. She spent years believing love meant giving Sydney whatever she wanted. Only after nearly losing both daughters did she begin to understand that favoritism isn't love. It's fear disguised as affection. Grandpa never mentioned the Audi again. Instead, he invited me back to the same restaurant where he'd given me the keys months earlier. As dessert arrived, he slid another small box across the table. I laughed. "Another car?" He smiled. "No." "Open it." Inside was a simple brass key. "What is it?" "My downtown office." He leaned back in his chair. "I've spent 50 years building this company. It's time someone who understands the difference between value and appearances helps decide what comes next." I looked at the key for a long moment, then back at him. "This isn't because I'm family." He smiled. "No. It's because you proved you wouldn't trade your integrity for something that already belonged to you." For years, I thought the greatest gift Grandpa ever gave me was an Audi. I was wrong. The Audi could be stolen, transferred, forged, recovered. Integrity couldn't. And in the end, that turned out to be the only inheritance nobody could ever take away.